So yes, today we're doing an adaptation of some of the SQEP conversations that we've had in the past, where we focus on some of the major defects, how to dispute them, how to avoid them. With SQEP, we always like to say, you know, avoiding is easier than having to fight them. You know, if you can just get everything kind of all in order in the first place, then it's a much less kind of tedious process than having to dispute, or knowing the right moves to kind of avoid invalid fines as well is super key. But yeah, just kind of more of a focused conversation today on the major defects, the most prevalent ones. This is us. We are content coordinators, so reach out to us. Let us know what you want to hear about. Is there anything that you want kind of researched? Something in this format or in an article format, in an in-person event? Let us know what you want us to cover for you, and let us be the educational branch of your business. These are the FAQs. We get these every time. Yes, you will be getting a copy of the slide deck. You will also be getting a recording of this webinar. We're putting everything up on YouTube these days, so look out for that as well. If this is something that you find helpful, that you think would be helpful for your team as well, copy that YouTube link and send it out to other people too. It should always be there for you as well. If you have a question, you are all familiar with the chat function. The chat function is public, so if you have a comment that you want everyone to see, go ahead and put it in the chat. But if you have a question that's for us, more of a kind of a formal SQEP question, go ahead and put that in the Q&A. And then we can kind of try to address it at the right time in the webinar. It might be in our Q&A section at the end. It might be a little bit earlier. So go ahead and use the Q&A function for the formal questions that you have. If you have information that you want to kind of make public to everyone else, to kind of have more of a communal conversation, that's what the chat is for. So feel free to use both of those as much as you like throughout. All righty, now a little introduction to SupplyPike. SupplyPike is the kind of the umbrella under which Supplier Wiki belongs. SupplyPike, our main goal as a SaaS company, as a software, as a service company, is to help CPGs reduce revenue loss in the retail space. So we got started with helping people fight invalid AP deductions back in the day, especially at Walmart. And we've since been expanding to other retailers. And we've also been, as today is evidenced of, expanding outside of the AP deductions realm into the general world of revenue loss, from the first day of a CPG until it's sold to a customer. How can we help you guys avoid some of the major kind of revenue loss pitfalls in that process? And these are some of the brands that we're most kind of proud of working with, and that we have helped win back a considerable amount of that revenue already. Okay, we got some announcements here that we'll try to keep kind of brief so we can get right into the main material. We just hit the 500 million mark. I think it was last week or a few weeks ago, that we've recovered for our clients. Again, the start there was AP deductions, but now that's a variety of different kinds of revenue loss. So it's a big milestone for us that we're really proud of. We've got an in-person event coming up that's centered around Item 360 and some of the most important kind of features of that app. If this is an app that you or people on your team use, or that you know other people in your company who have to be in this app a lot, I know a lot of people have to, let them know about this event. It's going to be in person in the Northwest Arkansas area in Rogers. So if you're in that area, Rogers, Bentonville, Fayetteville, Springdale area, please come in person, wake up early and join us for some coffee and breakfast. But if you can't make it in person, we have a way to live stream it as well. So you can just hop in on the live stream for that. We're really excited about this with Dee Dee.
Yes, and I'll just speak a little bit to the event. Dee Dee is awesome. She actually works with a couple of the same clients that we work with, but Dee Dee has a lot of experience, over 20 years of experience. And one of her main focuses is retail link, especially item 360. So she's going to walk through that. And she's gotten to work with some awesome brands in her career, such as Disney, Pam Olive, Colgate, Johnson & Johnson, P&G. So really excited. She's excited to come up. And usually her classes are a fee, but we've just waived that fee for everybody. So come on down and get to learn from her. I'm really excited because I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into item 360 as well. All right. Thank you, Peter, for introducing us into today's content. Well, we'll get into it. First, we're going to start with the SupplyPike findings. So this is something that we've done some research that has been helpful for us understanding how SQEP fines are affecting suppliers. So just to level set, if you are new to the world of preventing and disputing SQEP fines, we have a lot of resources on that. I'm sure Peter can share some of them in the chat. He can't share all of them, but you can definitely look, just type in SQEP on Supplier Wiki and it will pull up. We've got articles coming. We're going to be writing articles on most of these 36 SQEP defects, but what we have existing today is a couple SQEP webinars that really lay out each phase and understanding what the program is trying to achieve and how suppliers can work in tandem with that instead of feeling like they're being inundated with fines. So let's go ahead and get into it, and we'll kind of level set what we're going to get into today. So our team, our product team at SupplyPike started to look at SQEP when it became a problem that a lot of suppliers were asking us about. Like, have you heard about SQEP? What is SQEP? Can you help us dispute SQEP fines? How do I dispute SQEP fines without you? Or other just questions that are being asked. So we started to define what the problem was to see if it was in scope, at least for Supplier Wiki, but also for a potential product, which we'll talk about at the end if you'd like to stay on for that. So as a lot of you know, there's about 63 defect types and counting. And we say in counting because currently phases 1 through 3 have rolled out for SQEP. But phase 4 has not currently rolled out and is still TBD on when that is going to roll out. We've heard it was going to roll out in this first quarter. I'm assuming that's Walmart's quarter when they release that. So we're still in the time frame where SQEP phase 4 could be released. But again, we've not heard anything, and we're continuing to ask suppliers like yourselves if you've heard anything, if you have any documentation that might say that SQEP 4 is coming out, because it's a question we're getting quite often. So I'd love to see if anybody in the chat has anything about that. Also, there's about 6 different ways the fines are calculated. So based on whatever phase you're in and the way that phase's defect is basically derived, depending on if it's from automated data or if it's from a physical person inspecting it in the DC, it's going to be calculated differently, which means phase 1 ASN not downloaded may be like $200 to $400, but something in a phase 3 may be like $1,000. You really never know what the amount is going to be until that end of the month when your SQEP fines come in. And kind of like to what I was talking about before, there are invalid fines coming from automated tech. So we've seen some issues with automated tech and with some of the just physical inspection data. So with automated tech, that's something Walmart plans to fully roll out in the future. But if you've been in your SQEP dashboard, you'll probably see a little orange banner that says like, fines from phase 2, this type of defect are not in account for the month of March. And that's because their tech is either not working the way that they would want to. And you might see some of that shown in Fix It when you get a picture of a box and they said, you know, this has a pallet issue. And you're like, that's not even my product. Or that the same thing can happen with some of the inspection, like the physical inspections that are happening. You can get sent a picture and Fix It, and you look at it and you're like, that's not even remotely close to what my product is. So there's a lot of confusion on the Walmart side as they're figuring out how they automate the SQEP process, but that means suppliers are also kind of on the other end, trying to figure out if a fine is valid for them, or if it is their product, if it's still valid. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here today. And then I'm sure if you've attended any of our webinars, we reference the supplier packaging guide that Walmart has released. It's a secondary packaging guide. It's about 200 plus pages, which gives a little bit more information about what defects, how defects are created, and how to be in line with what Walmart expects. And that is a helpful document, but it's huge and it breaks down everything into little pieces, depending on what category you're in or how you ship things. So it can be a little bit difficult to find out how you're actually going to stay compliant with your SQEP fines. And then again, this kind of drives home the points that we've talked through here, but there is a lack of consistency and clarity since this rolled out in 2021 across the phases, at DCs, at how data is being inspected physically. Some of the information that's been released feels like it can be contradictory or not giving the details that suppliers need. So we want to help clarify that, and we'll kind of get into some of those fines today. So basically, there's a whole lot of information across Retail Link that makes disputing SQEP fines difficult. There's this documentation, for phase 1, there's phase 2, you can see it popping up behind. There's phase 3, there's the other defect descriptions. There's your calculations for how things happen. There's other calculations on how cases are impacted and what the actual dollar amount will come out to be. So as you can see, just from all of those, there's a lot of information, and it is a little bit scattered all over Retail Link. And that can be part of the problem, is it's just overwhelming for suppliers to understand what's going on. And then also applying that to prevention and ultimately disputing fines correctly. So we're going to talk about the 5 fines that kind of contribute to the majority of these and how you can fight those. Because while there are 63, we've actually gathered some data that are helpful when it comes to tackling those fines. All right, so like I said, SupplyPike kind of gathered some data from some of the suppliers we work with, and we found some interesting insights that may help when you are looking at disputing. So from a year's worth of data from about 250 suppliers, we saw that almost 100% of suppliers received a SQEP fine. So that's 97.5%. And when you compare that to OTIF suppliers, who are only receiving about 89 in the last year, you see a lot of overlap in OTIF and SQEP programs, but it's surprising to us when we saw that there's actually a significant amount more SQEP fines that are hitting suppliers. So we realize that it's a prevalent problem. 28% of those suppliers had more SQEP fines than OTIF fines on average. So we're seeing that while SQEP fines and OTIF fines can be related, and I can give an example of if you've shipped something, but the ASN has not come in and it gets processed incorrectly, that could infect your on time. Or if you have an in full fine, it could be also tied to a SQEP fine, like an overage and a shortage situation. So these fines can start to overlap, but it was surprising to us that they weren't necessarily matching on a level. So SQEP is actually covering more supply chain accuracy than OTIF is, which creates more fines for suppliers. And then kind of what I alluded to earlier, 5 of those defects from SQEP make up about 83% of total fines. And that was actually encouraging to us. While we don't love that suppliers get fines and we want to help with that, it is encouraging that not every supplier is getting all 63 fines, because that's when you really have to kind of go into the weeds and understand each defect type and learn what's expected and the proof documentation, how to do a validity check. So we felt that the fact that 5 of those defects make up the majority is really encouraging when it comes to just bulking those, understanding them, knowing how to process them, and also knowing how to prevent them. So we'll talk about those here in a minute, and we'll get into all of that. And then just some other things to talk about how we gather those numbers. We had some of those just research calls with Walmart suppliers who helped us have insight into some of the nitty-gritty of what's going on in this particular compliance program. And then just kind of drive home what I was saying previously. Again, we looked at this data, and as phases roll out, you can kind of see them come up on the chart, but essentially you are seeing a trend upwards of SQEP fines, and we predict that once phase 4 rolls out as well, you'll see just that continuing increase. Again, the way that the months kind of are decreased in some of the areas, I would say that's more to Walmart working on kinks in their automation. So again, this is still something that's trending up, and a question I posed to suppliers: is this something you're still seeing? Do you feel like your SQEP fines are increasing and you don't have a handle on them, or are they decreasing and you haven't really touched them? Or are they decreasing because you've actually put some prevention in place, or you've disputed? That's just an interesting question. I'd love to hear what people have experienced. But anyways, let's talk about those top 5 SQEP defects that I mentioned earlier. These are the ones that account for 83% of the total SQEP fines. And you can see that they mostly stay in those first 2 phases. So phase 1 and phase 2 are really, I think, the ones that are hitting suppliers the most. And you can see that they're broken down into their phase reason, and then defect code reason. So this is important to understand because you may have a fine that's in phase 1 or phase 2, but then it breaks down into, it gives you like an example, PO accuracy, and then it can actually go even further down to the defect reason code, which is where you really get the information you need to dispute. And for phase 1, that's ASN not downloaded and overage. For phase 2, those defect reason codes look a little confusing. It looks like there's a repeat, but actually you have the incorrect quantity on barcode compliance and you have incorrect quantity on label compliance. And we'll kind of tease the differences out there for both of those. And then again, the last one that I didn't mention here yet is incorrect barcode on barcode compliance. And you can see that each one accounts for a good chunk of change, totaling up to about 17 million. And that's that 82.74% of fines. So we'll go through all of these. We'll talk about what you can do to prevent those and dispute. All right, and before we get into that, did want to just do some SQEP updates. We've done SQEP webinars, and the main questions are always, what are the updates about phase 4? What are the updates about the technology? So here's what we've heard from multiple different suppliers, or what we've kind of seen in different chat groups. Phase 2 and 3 charges are predicted to uptick with the updated technology. So Walmart's goal is to update all DCs by the end of the year to have this technology that does more of the automation inspection rather than manual inspections for these phases. So this is a great time to kind of understand what's going on with your business, what kind of SQEP fines are you getting, and how to prevent those. And then again, I did allude to this, but phase 4 is scheduling and transportation. There's still a lot of TBD around this phase. So if you have any insight, we'd love to hear from you. I know scheduling and transportation seems very vague, and you would be correct. But we have seen that some suppliers mentioned it will roll out in the beginning of Walmart's fiscal year. Another call out I'd like to make is that, and I may have included it into today's slide, we did see a Fix-It portal pop up that says that it looks like it's attributed to scheduling and transportation. So we'll share some of that information. Maybe it's in your Retail Link account. You can go ahead and look and see if another Fix-It app pops up, but there's no data populating in it. So we assume that it's ramping up. But again, share any information you might have, because we'd be interested to know and share that with other suppliers. All right, now let's get into kind of the meat and potatoes of today's conversation, understanding what those 5 SQEP defects that I mentioned, what they really mean, and how we can learn prevention and disputing. All right. Our first one is in phase 1, and it is ASN not downloaded. So what is that? Walmart's definition, when you kind of dig into some of their documentation, is ASN not sent or ASN failed to download. So what this really means is that ASN was not received for a PO line, or it wasn't sent before the shipment arrived. So this often is a timing issue, and we can get into that here in a little bit. But essentially, those fees come out to either a flat fee per PO of $25 for non-DSDC, but then a $200 flat fee per PO for DSD and Department 38 only. And again, more information on this can be found on the SQEP dashboard. You're not actually going to see, maybe someone has seen fix-it information about ASN not downloaded, but from the suppliers we've worked with, it's not supposed to be included in fix-it. You can find your information in the SQEP dashboard within Retail Link, and look at those PO line accuracy filters to examine overages as well as the ASN not downloaded information. All right, and then the second phase 1 defect that we are seeing is overages, and that is when the PO line shipped exceeded the quantity ordered, and that charge looks like essentially just, you've have the PO, but it is overed somewhere. And a call out here is we often see an overage paired with a deduction, because while most suppliers aren't sending out an overage, that can happen. There might be really just a mix match of if, a case pack got moved to a different one, a different DC. So check also here for shortages in your AP deductions. So what does that charge look like? It's going to be about $200 per defect plus $1 per impacted case. So as you can see, we'll go through this. The charges look a little bit different depending on what defect you're looking at, even if they're in the same phase. So why is this prevalent? Why do a lot of suppliers see this particular SQEP defect? Its receiving errors are pretty common at Walmart. And for this, it's just don't overship is for the best way for prevention. But oftentimes we're seeing that these are invalid because something has happened and you're either getting a wrong calculation on what's included, or you've had some of your case packs moved, or if they're not wrapped in a pallet, that can be something. Or even if you have, 3 green products in case packs and then 4 orange ones in another one, they either automated could see that as, you sent that full amount in just the green, or vice versa. Same with the inspection, the manual inspection. And again, I know I'm kind of, I'm repeating myself here, but it's really important that if your team is working on SQEP, that your team working on AP deductions understands that there may be an overage on this PO, because you may be able to get money back in 2 places. So overage defects in SQEP get created when the quantity of an item on the invoice does not match the quantity that was received. So just check those and make sure that they're lining up. All right. Our third SQEP defect is in phase 2, and that's barcode compliance and incorrect barcode. And it's important to know that barcode compliance, the defect covers 3 sub defects, and that's wrong format, incorrect quantity, and incorrect barcode. And today we're talking about incorrect barcode. So there's some varying definitions depending on how the issue is found. And this is when going to our item 360 event may be helpful. I believe Peter has shared or will share the item 360 event sign up in the chat, but basically if it's being inspected, that means manually some human is looking at your barcodes, they see that they're present, but they don't match the OLIF or the item 360, then you're going to get dinged for incorrect barcode, even if you have something present. And then for automation, you may have the correct format for the item configuration, but it may not match OLIF or item 360, or if wrong format is identified, the incorrect barcode will also be identified. So those can kind of be interchangeable. And it's helpful to know if you are looking at the picture, you can kind of tell usually if automation or inspection has happened, and that can kind of give more context to the story when it comes to incorrect barcode. And then when it comes to charges, they, especially for phase 2, you will get different charges based on inspection and automation. So for inspection, meaning that manual human who is looking at your barcode, it's going to be a $200 admin fee, defect per item per PO, and $1 per impacted PO. So that's important, or impacted case, excuse me. And then for automation, it's going to be $1 per case impacted. So it's just important to know that, because you can see one of them is a little bit more expensive. And as they're ramping up to automation, yes, you would have technically, if you're thinking of it kind of gamifying the system, it would be less money impacted from automation, but you may see more of those because inspection kind of happens intermittently. And then again, why is it prevalent? As automation is implemented at DCs, we expected this to increase. In the case of valid disputes, so it is the responsibility of the supplier, something has happened on your end. Reference the Walmart secondary packaging guide. We have some great information in some of our old or our existing webinars about what page numbers to look at. So go to the deep dive SQEP phase 2 and 3. But in the case of invalid fines, these are mostly manual inspection. Just review your fix-it tickets, and we'll kind of talk about the best ways to do that as well. All right, so still under barcode compliance. Remember, we talked about that barcode compliance is a defect, and then there's 3 sub-defects. We're going to go into incorrect quantity. So we were just on incorrect barcode, and now we're in incorrect quantity. So this means that the incorrect quantity of required format for both inspection and automation, and that is from the words of Walmart, but if you put that simply, each vendor pack needs 2 barcodes on each box. And the reason for this is mostly for the automation. So the way that they have scanners set up for barcodes when they're receiving case packs, or however you package and ship your inventory, is there are 2 scanners on different sides, and the scanners should be able to at least scan one of those. So if one of the barcodes doesn't work, or there's neither of the barcodes work, that's when you're going to see one of the incorrect quantities come through. And I just saw Peter pop up, so I assume that there's a question.
Yes, we have a question. What is OLIF? You mentioned OLIF next to item 360 there under inspection. Do you know what that stands for?
I'm forgetting what the acronym means, and maybe Peter, you can do some sleuthing for me while I'm thinking about this, but essentially that is Walmart's guide. Oh, perfect. Lisa said online item file. Yeah, so that's for .com, and that's just Walmart's version of looking up the information needed for the item file. And that's mostly for .com, I believe. So this is a great question. Apologies that I forgot what that means. So thanks for coming in clutch, Lisa. Perfect. Again, we're seeing a theme when it comes to phase 2 charges. The fee is going to be the $200 admin fee per item per PO, plus the $1 per case impacted, and then automation, which is going to be a little bit less, which we kind of talked through that already. And then why is this prevalent? It's pretty similar. Again, there are some patterns. So if you are kind of thinking ahead, disputing phase 2 can be pretty easy to bulk those together, especially when you have like barcode compliance and it's an incorrect quantity and wrong format and incorrect barcode. You can kind of start either in the prevention side and looking at Walmart secondary packaging guide, or you can go in and look at your inspection that's happening in your fix-it tickets. All right, last of the 5 defects is label compliance, and that is also in phase 2. The one we are focusing on is incorrect quantity. So there's two compliance defects. There's two sub defects under label compliance, and that's going to be wrong format, incorrect quantity, and incorrect barcode. Oh, sorry, I mean 3. And then incorrect quantity means that there are not the correct amount of barcodes. And often this issue comes down to that the barcodes are correct, but they are not correct on both sides. So what's the charge look like? So inspection looks the same as the 2 phases we are in, because we're still in phase 2, same with automation. So I'll kind of breeze by that. And then same for the prevalence. If you're confused on phase 2, go read secondary packaging guide. It's not as helpful for phase 1, but it is helpful for phase 2 and 3. And then in the case of invalid fines, again, your fix-it tickets are the place to start when you're getting curious about if you should be disputing or not. And Peter, it looks like you have another question for me.
Yes, you have another question about barcode compliance again. So from the last slide a little bit. How can I tell what exactly is wrong on the incorrect barcode if everything in my system matches item 360? Do you have any kind of advice for that situation?
Yeah, we'll get into that, and I can kind of talk about validity check. So thank you for that question, Peter. When it comes to, if you have the 2 barcodes and it's pulling in item 360, you may not have it exactly the way Walmart wants it, or there may be an issue with where you're placing it. And I believe that's the question that you asked. I want to make sure I captured all of that, Peter. So let me know if I missed something. But essentially, yeah, it can come down to you don't have it in the exact format. And I know that there's a page number. And if Peter, if you're willing to do the digging, I know there's an exact page number where it shows you that barcode. And it's really important to have some of that information that's on there, like GTIN and some of the other like exact placement. So I would review that barcode. But again, we can kind of come back to that as we're talking about how we discover validity. All right, now we're getting into the fun part. Let's talk about how we can actually fight these prevalent SQEP charges that we've covered and also prevent them in the future. All right, so here are the SQEP steps for success. And this is kind of the framework we use to think about these. So of course, we've kind of spent most of our time in understand, to unpack what these fines mean, what we're going to be charged, why they're prevalent. And now we're about to go into the prevention and disputing portion, which is more of taking action depending on if they are valid or not. All right, so if you're aiming to understand, the first place to start, I would say, is the SQEP scorecard. And it's important to review this on a weekly basis for insight to kind of understand, oh, okay, I've got an uptick in this phase 2. I need to go look at my fix-it cards. That will kind of go into some of the other steps. But really, this is a great place to land when you're trying to understand what's going on with your projected fines, because that's how they come into the SQEP scorecard. And then just your overall performance, you can look at past performance, and we can kind of get into how you're tracking that in high radius as well. So I sound like a broken record, but read through the secondary supplier packaging guide and then understand those reason codes. So we've talked about the first 5, which are key to understanding 83% of your fees overall for most suppliers, but it might look different for you. So maybe you're seeing, oh, I'm getting these 5 fines. Let me look at those. Understand the reason codes that are impacting you the most, and how Walmart is gathering the data for that and issuing those fines, because it may reveal something really helpful either in the prevention side and taking responsibility for an error that you weren't aware of before, or disputing those and helping Walmart understand some of the accountability that comes on their side. All right, and then that second step for SQEP success is preventing, and we kind of attribute Fix-It to that, because Fix-It helps you understand what's going on, and that's a great place, and I feel like is one of the more helpful apps when it comes to understanding what's valid and what's not valid. So we suggest that you review those before the business review period, and I'll kind of talk about that here in a second, to prevent having to dispute through high radius or just gather additional information for disputing. So you can actually take your fix-it tickets and they can be addressed or assigned back to Walmart for clarification. And sometimes we have seen that those fix-it tickets, you send them back, you say, this is not my item, or this is incorrect, or can you clarify? And when you word that question really well, it can actually help you with disputing in the future, or you might see that fix-it ticket just disappear, which means that suppliers are no longer accountable for that. So again, just some tips for using Fix-It. Ask very specific questions to avoid receiving the wrong answer. We have a great in-person event that our good friend Ken Lettery did for us on preventing. He actually works for GNC, and he showed us a couple of different great ways to phrase questions or ask them based on the different phases. So you can check that out on YouTube as well. You can understand Walmart's kind of copy paste responses and what that means by continuing to submit those Fix-It tickets. And then again, keep it to one question per SQEP charge for best results. So really, you do have to learn how to say a lot in a very concise way. And Peter, I see that you've popped up again. So do you have a question for me?
Yes, sorry. From here on out, I think I'll try to save them for the Q&A.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally good.
This one is about fixes, so it's pretty relevant. And the conversation that we had with Ken Lettery. One guest just wants to know how do we know if the fine will be waived if you submitted the correction and fix it? Is there a way that they can kind of check up on that?
It is a little bit tedious. And Peter, if you'd like to add something here too, I'd be very welcome to that. But essentially, the fine should disappear and you shouldn't see it in high radius. But I would go ahead and note what that PO number is or save documentation on that, because you might see it come up in your high radius account, and you should just be able to say, hey, this was already fixed and fix it apparently, but I'm seeing it in my high radius account, so I'd like this waived. That's just really, if I had to only give one tip to suppliers across all different disputing platforms, is just save your own documentation. Don't expect to have things saved in Walmart's retail link for you because of the way that they hold data and kind of do 13 rolling weeks of saving that, or even just Fix-It tickets disappearing when you've asked a question. I think it's just best to save that for yourself in case it does come up again. It shouldn't, but it may. So I know that's not the most encouraging thing to hear, but we've seen success for suppliers who just save that documentation. All right, and now we're going on to disputing. So again, if you're not aware, you actually don't dispute in Retail Link despite how you dispute for AP deductions. You do that in high radius, and you also dispute your OTIF fines in high radius as well. So based on the business review period or the invoicing schedule for SQEP, have some time to set aside, block it off on your calendar at the end of each month to dispute fines in high radius. And then this is just the basic information that you're going to need to dispute. That's going to be your PO number, item number, defect type, DC number, the impacted cases, and then any additional information from Walmart. So maybe some documentation from Fix-It, shipping documents, anything that can kind of prove your case when it comes to your SQEP defects. All right, and this is the invoicing schedule that I alluded to. So it may be helpful for your team to think about how you work on the SQEP steps for success based on the schedule. So on the 21st of the month, the prior month's data in the SQEP portal will be locked, so it is final. And then that 22nd to the 27th of the month is the business review period, where Walmart's team and high radius kind of decide what fines are going to be processed and what they're going to send back to you. And then the 28th of the month is where they start that financial processing and that billing is generated. So amounts on billing that are going to be generated at the end of the month will be deducted from the next scheduled outgoing payment. So it's important to get ahead of that and dispute those. I know for OTIF, you have about 13 months, but I haven't heard necessarily from SQEP. So go ahead and try to dispute some of those backdated ones. But again, it's easier to stay on the schedule. So you're still having access to the information or any proof documentation or DSS reports. So important just to say that if you're not pulling those things from Retail Link already. All right, and then kind of when we're thinking about at SupplyPike how to dispute, it can be daunting to understand how you start. So this is kind of our roadmap to that, and you can change this based on what works for you, but based on what we've seen for suppliers, it's best to start with reviewing the SQEP scorecard for projected fines and then kind of bucketing them into phase 1 or phase 2 or 3, because those seem to be a little bit different. So if it's a phase 1 fine, you'll review the chargeback summary, but if it's phase 2, see if you have a ticket and fix it and look at that chargeback summary as well, depending on when you're coming into the disputing based on the invoicing schedule. And then it's really important to have that validity check. So review your proof documentation, understand if other teams, if they're working on AP deductions, have seen a shortage that matches your overage. And then you determine in your team whether that's valid. So saying, yes, you know what, we made the mistake. We didn't read, you know, page 127 of the packaging guide, and we're going to update our system. And we're going to understand how to do that better next time. So you write that off, and then just working on prevention, saving documentation, sharing learning across cross-functional teams, and applying what you've learned if it is a valid fine. And then if it is invalid, meaning that you're not responsible for the issue that has been attributed to the SQEP defect, then organize your proof documentation and then dispute in high radius or fix it. If you have the chance and it's a phase 2 or 3 to dispute and fix it, we see that that's a lot easier. But again, if it's in high radius, that's where it is, and you can also win there. All right. So let me just do a quick time check for myself. We're doing good on time. I'm going to go a little bit faster on these. We will send you this deck, so don't feel like you have to take copious notes. But essentially, the main prevention point on ASN downloaded is to make sure that the ASN is sent before the shipment arrives at the Walmart DC. And a good rule of thumb is as soon as a PO is out, the trucks are leaving from your own ship point, go ahead and send that to them. And then how would you dispute this? Again, this would not be in fix it. You'd submit it in high radius. And it's important to have proof documentation for disputing, like an EDI 997, BSN information, ASN information, carrier signed BOL, and shipment confirmation. So we can go a little bit more into that if people have questions later. For overages, prevention, again, sometimes it comes to, if it is a valid dispute, making sure you're differentiating your packages, not just on the barcode, but making sure that if a human is looking at 2 boxes with barcodes, that they know that, you know, one has this type of product and the other has a different type of product, so you can avoid those receiving errors. Another prevention point is confirming that the fulfillment information is correctly flowing to the warehouse. So just checking your EDIs, and then confirm that your items are set up correctly. And that can be another pain point that we've seen. And you can dispute those by submitting your information in high radius. Like I said before, look for shortages that match an overage. If that's correct, you can actually win back 2. And because these are overages, they're not going to be in fix it, so you do submit these in high radius. Another call out is that DSS data can be used to match invalid overages, and we can send you that information if we haven't included it in today's presentation. Perfect. For phase 2 defects, essentially what's really great about these is if they're barcode compliance, you can kind of, and label compliance, you can kind of bulk these together and do them in very similar ways. So the workflow is actually not too different. Like we said, Walmart requires 2 properly formatted labels on each carton with at least 1 placed on the longest side. So if they're on short sides, that might be your issue. And then including required details like the GTN barcode, Walmart item number, supplier stock number. There's a couple other things on that that detail that you need, but it's outlined in the Walmart suppliers, the Walmart secondary packaging guide. And then just make sure that item 360 matches your barcodes. The second part of this is how you dispute them. So look at Fix-It, see if it's even your product, or it even makes sense that they're assigning it based on the picture. Maybe ask a question back, and then attach any proof documentation if you're disputing in Fix-It. And if you aren't able to win it in Fix-It and you know that it's invalid, go ahead and take it over to HighRadius and try and win it in that area. All right, so this is basically a review, but if you're new to disputing in HighRadius, this is a helpful guide. You can dispute in open and close bills. The only difference is that bills that have been paid off or matched with transactions are open bills, and after matching those bills, they're marked as closed, but both are able to be disputed. And then we've talked through this a lot, but you just have prompts to where you input this information, all the way down to attachments for your documents and dispute reasons. So make sure you match those with what it was assigned to you from Walmart. All right, and then lastly, if you're following up, you can look at any submitted disputes. Often, if you're not seeing it in there, make sure you hit the button at the very bottom. It's like a little orange button that would say save or submit, and that will ensure that you have submitted a dispute. If you didn't, you might need to go back or see if it's saved somewhere within HighRadius. And then lastly, just a reminder that take the information you have from SQEP and make sure you're comparing it to your other compliance programs like OTIF and deductions. This can be helpful when fighting some of these other compliance or the deduction program because they're independent from each other. It can help you win back invalid fines or deductions, but you can also, if you're not talking between teams that handle these, or you're not looking at one of these compliance programs, you might actually be losing 3 times the amount based on 1 PO. So that's just a call out, is make sure that you're not losing money on 1 PO based on these 3 different and very separate compliance and deduction programs at Walmart. All right, and then I'll breeze through this, but when it comes to asking for help or finding the source of information in Retail Link, we know that that can be tricky. So we've kind of outlined this here on some of the help numbers or finding different information within Retail Link. And we'll send this over to you once you receive the slide deck. And then we just keep going. I kind of forget what happens once I get through the middle of the content, but essentially we have lots of SQEP resources. These are some of the pictures that you'll be looking for when you're on Supplier Wiki. You can download our SQEP handbook, which is kind of a printed guide of the information. That is more of a one-stop shop if you're just wanting to review it at a high level. And then we've also got some courses that dive deeper into the phases and how you can actually identify and avoid those SQEP fines. All right, I think we are through with that. So we'll go ahead and go into the questions. Peter?
Just a quick reminder to everyone, if you have any lingering questions, if there's anything that you can think of, to try to get it in the chat now. After this, we'll do a little kind of preview of some of the SQEP things that we're going to do in our actual product. So it'll be a little bit more salesy. So there will be time to get your questions in, both on that aspect, but also on any kind of SQEP related question that you have for your business. So go ahead and try to get those in now. If you can, if there's anything lingering. We just had one question in the chat earlier about, more specifically, kind of about barcode again. Our carton marks are correct. So this is the beginning of the question. GTIN barcode, shipping label, these are correct. Yet when the FedEx label is applied, it is applied to the top of the carton. Is there a correct placement? We can't find any documentation for this label. So that might be a label question, might be a barcode question. I'm not sure if you know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say what is most helpful is digging in and seeing fix-it information. Like I said earlier, maybe, and again, this is how you ship. Sounds like if it's through FedEx that you have a smaller, you're not on a pallet or anything like that. So I would search some keywords in the secondary packaging guide. So like UPS or smaller case packs, or if you're shipping a certain way, looking those up in that secondary packaging guide to see if there's, you know, an asterisk that says, well, if you're shipping this way, you need to do this. And you can do that by clicking Command Find or Control F or Control F or Command F. But when it comes to that particular question, there could be a couple things. She said, I believe, that it's set up correctly, like they've scanned the barcode and it's connected to the correct item. I would say that it's probably either pulling incorrect quantity, if I'm thinking of it at the sub-level defect, or it's the wrong placement. It's small parcel and it's showing up in fix it. Okay, then I think the best course of action would be to go ahead and ask a question and fix it, asking more detailed about what the actual issue is. So even something like, could you point me in the direction of what exactly the issue is here? I know that it's wrong format or whatever the sub defect is. Could it be placement? Could it be this? Kind of do your research and list some things out for fix it so you can understand what's going on. But I feel like what I'm understanding now is because of where UPS is putting the shipment label, that they're having an issue since maybe it's on that top and they expect it on the long side, which is just strange because if it's coming in process wise, I don't know if they have two scanners on the side or a scanner above and on the sides. That might be the issue. And I apologize that I don't have a concrete answer, but I would say do your research on fix it and ask them exactly what you would do to correct that, and also do some research on the secondary packaging guide, but also looking up small parcel as a keyword in the secondary packaging guide may kind of point you to what you're looking for. So
yeah, and just as a reminder for that too, that with the fix it chat, what we know is just that the first question, you get a pretty specific answer to a first specific question. So getting that first question kind of just right is key for that. It's very rare that you get someone responding to like a follow-up question or something like that too. So that's pretty tricky, but that's another kind of part of the process that we've heard from other people as well. Well, that's it as far as our questions go. Pat says, great, thank you. So I think that we may have answered that question there adequately. Here's our emails up on the screen. For those of you, if you have any lingering questions, maybe just write these down anyways. You know, you'll get these slides in a few days, but if you want to write this down and just kind of maybe go try to put some of this learning into work in HighGraph or Fixit or something like that, and just write down the emails just in case you have any follow-up questions. We'd love to be able to help you with that process as well. And like I said, we'll be sending this out pretty soon too. So now we're going to kind of pivot a little bit. This will be a little bit more salesy. If you guys think that you're interested in a solution to a SQEP problem, stay on. We'd love to give you a little bit of a sense of what our product is like, but we also want to keep the integrity of Supplier Wiki intact. We don't want to become a sales platform. We are a free educational resource. So if this is not something that you'd be interested in, go ahead and sign out whenever you like. But we are really excited about this new kind of step that we're taking into compliance at Walmart. Being able to fight SQEP deductions with our products is something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and we're really excited about the future of it. Our team has been working super hard on it. So yes, Ali, go ahead and take it away.
All right, thank you. And just to reiterate what Peter said, we want to be education first. So this is kind of the more sales part of our call. So if this is where you sign off, we will see you at another webinar, and we appreciate you staying on. But let's get to it. So we're going to kind of look at some of the details that we have for the SQEP product. And like I said at the very beginning, we did a lot of research to see if this is a problem that is addressable for suppliers, and it turns out it is. So we are launching a SQEP product, and it is coming in our Q2. So we've just entered April. We're expecting the first part of the product to be done in around May, June. So we're really excited and ramping up to this particular product. So the SQEP solution is going to be launched in about 2 different phases, and then we'll continue to update. But the main phase that will be available in the early access program in this quarter is visibility. So just combining some of the sources of information into one easy location, so that you're not opening 6 different apps in Retail Link, and so you can understand exactly what each one of these defects mean. So you're welcome to memorize them, but we have committed them to heart and have kind of outlined what they mean, so you can make a great decision when it comes to disputing. So in Q2, we'll have that ready, but by Q3, we're going to have a disputing function based on we'll also have some updates based on user feedback for those who are in the early access program. So we'll be excited for that, but it will be focused on disputing like any of our other products, like SupplyPike for Walmart, which allows you to dispute OTIF fines and deductions, as well as what we have for Target, Kroger, and Amazon. So this will be really exciting, and I'll kind of give you a little sneak peek into some of the other features that are coming. So it'll have the 4 sources of relevant SQEP data all in one place. It'll look pretty similar to this. You'll be able to spot trends because of SQEP issues very quickly and easily. It'll be a very accessible dashboard, and you'll be able to filter between, stores and PO types and helpful things. Those in-app explanations of the 63 defect types, so you don't have to commit them all to memory, and then process automation for Retail's Fix It. And that's what's coming here in Q2, and we'll have more updates in Q3. And while I'm not going to go into the product today, I did kind of just want to show you what it will look like when we have the disputing feature. This is a GIF we have of a OTIF radar. It'll be modeled pretty simply, where you just kind of click what's happening in the POs below, dispute those POs, and it will be ready to go. So very exciting. If you are interested in being a part of the early access program, you can get in contact with us and we'll connect you to our product team. But other than that, that's just a quick sneak peek of what is to come with this SQEP product. And if you want a little bit more information, you can find us at SupplyPike, or again, we'll just connect you to our product team if you email us. So with that, I will end us here. Thank you all for staying on, and thank you, Peter, for the questions and the support you gave me today.